Americans, they need to understand something that very few in the corporate media are willing to say plainly. Are you ready? China is already at war with the United States. This is not a future war. This is not a hypothetical war. This is not merely economic competition, folks. This is a multi-dimensional war that's being fought right now against America. And it's being fought economically. It's being fought on the level of technology, military, politics, culture, and of course, psychologically, and of course, always spiritually. And the most frightening thing about all of this, folks, China has strategically positioned America to be defeated on multiple fronts before the first major shot is ever fired. In fact, a leaked Pentagon assessment known as the Overmatch Brief, it reportedly warns that if the United States intervened militarily to defend Taiwan, China could devastate American forces before they are even fully deployed. Pentagon simulations reportedly showed Communist China crippling U.S. aircraft carriers, fighter squadrons, military satellites, and communication systems through missile barrages. And then, of course, cyber attacks and electronic warfare. So think about what that means. The Chinese Communist Party has spent decades studying America's military and our vulnerabilities. While America's elites, well, they were obsessed with drag queen story hour, cultural Marxism inside the Pentagon, open borders, transgender ideology, and of course, endless woke indoctrination. China, they prepared for war. America prepared for pronouns. And now we're seeing the consequences. In fact, reports indicate China has built an integrated military strategy specifically designed to neutralize America's technological advantages. Beijing, they have developed anti-ship missiles that are aimed at U.S. carriers, also at anti-satellite systems that are capable of blinding American forces. Then you add in cyber warfare capabilities. They're designed to cripple communications, our infrastructure, and massive industrial production capabilities, well, that dwarf America's shrinking manufacturing base. Meanwhile, America, well, we outsourced much of our industrial backbone to China. That was not merely bad economics, folks. This was national suicide. So consider the issue of rare earth minerals and critical materials. Are you ready? China now dominates. They dominate the global supply chain for rare earth processing. Materials, by the way, that are essential for advanced military systems like, semiconductors, satellites, missile guidance systems, submarines, radar systems, fighter jets, and of course, artificial intelligence and all the infrastructure that goes with that. China dominates on that. In fact, one report shows that 78% of U.S. military weapon systems may be vulnerable because of dependence on China's controlled critical minerals and components. So let that sink in tonight, folks. The nation preparing to defeat America militarily also controls the supply chain needed to build many of America's weapons systems. This is not merely dangerous, it's insanity. And perhaps one of the most dangerous vulnerabilities of all, folks, is America's dependence on communist China for pharmaceuticals and life-saving drugs. Most Americans, they have no idea how much of our pharmaceutical supply chain, including critical ingredients used in antibiotics, heart medications, blood pressure drugs, insulin, and other life-saving medications, is tied directly to communist China. So think about that insanity for a moment. The very nation preparing militarily and economically to challenge the United States also has enormous leverage over our medicines that millions of Americans depend upon every single day. This is not just an economic problem. This is a real national security nightmare. You see, China understands that modern warfare is not simply fought with bombs and bullets. It's fought through supply chains, manufacturing, technology, cyber warfare, and of course, economic dependency. If a major conflict erupted over Taiwan or elsewhere, China, they could disrupt pharmaceutical exports, they could cripple our supply chains, and they could create devastating shortages inside the United States, well, almost overnight. In other words, America, we have allowed ourselves to become dependent on a hostile communist regime, not only for critical military materials, but even for medicines that keep Americans alive. This is how vulnerable America has become. But how many Americans know what I'm even talking about tonight? No, they're too busy binge watching the next series on streaming television. And at the same time, there are increasing concerns about Chinese influence operations inside the United States. You just heard, I'm sure, about the lady that's been indicted, a mayor of a major city in California has been indicted, charged at the federal level for working with the CCP. That's the charge. Questions? Well, they continue to emerge regarding Beijing-linked funding networks, non-government organizations, political influence campaigns, universities, research partners, media operations, and of course, technology infiltration efforts that are ongoing. You see, China understands a simple reality. A divided nation is a weakened America. And so while Americans fight each other over race and gender and politics and ideology, well, China, they're quietly expanding their military. They're modernizing their navy. They're strengthening their alliances with Russia and Iran. And they're positioning themselves to challenge American leadership globally. This is why the Taiwan issue matters so much. Taiwan is not merely an island. Taiwan, it represents a strategic dominance in semiconductors. It also involves military positioning, shipping lanes, and technological infrastructure that's critical to the modern world economy. In China, they have made clear that reunification with Taiwan is not optional. So, President Trump on his way to China to meet with Xi Jinping. While geopolitical analysts, they're warning that America's deterrence posture in Asia has weakened considerably. You see, China, they see America as being distracted. China sees America as divided. China sees America weakened internally. And perhaps more importantly, and most importantly, China sees America dependent on China. This is why the Middle East and the conflict there also matters in the broader strategy picture. You see, China, they benefit when America's bogged down in multiple theaters at the same time. This is classic strategic overextension. And while America burns through resources overseas, China, they're preparing patiently for long-term dominance. Even more troubling, folks, is the growing ideological alliance between China, Russia, and Iran, along with anti-Western movements all around the globe. China provides economic leverage and industrial capacity. Russia, well, they provide military aggression. Iran, they export terrorism and proxy warfare all around the globe. And together, they are increasingly challenging the American-led world order. And this is not by accident. This is a coordinated geopolitical realignment. So, ladies and gentlemen, America is facing the greatest geopolitical challenge since World War II. But unlike previous generations, America now enters this conflict weakened from within. We've already talked tonight about the massive national debt. We have compromised supply chains. We have political corruption. That in itself is overwhelming. We have cultural collapse. You think that a man can become a woman. We have people that sit on the Supreme Court that cannot define what a woman is. We have had open borders for years. We have moral confusion. We have elites who sold out America's industrial base for profit. China did not create all of our problems, but China certainly has, well, masterfully exploited them. History teaches that great powers, they usually do not collapse overnight from foreign invasion alone. They generally collapse because of internal weakness and compromise and rejection of the very values and foundation that made them great from the start. And of course, all of this invites external aggression. Rome collapsed that way. That's how Rome collapsed. And America could collapse the same way. The warning lights, they're flashing red. China believes the balance of power is shifting, and they believe that America lacks the national unity that's necessary to get through this. Because you see, China believes America lacks, well, industrial resilience. They believe America lacks the will to endure and sacrifice. And now, as President Trump meets with Xi Jinping, the stakes, they could not be higher. Because the real issue is not whether China is preparing for war. The real issue is whether America is prepared to survive a war with China, not to mention their other power nations. Something to consider. That's why I have plenty of freeze-dried food, 2 or 3 years worth. That's why I have antibiotics and medical kits on hand. I'm not panicked. I'm not suffering from anxiety. I'm not trusting the Lord. I'm doing all that. I'm trusting the Lord. But I also understand times we live in, and a wise man, a prudent man sees danger and takes refuge and prepares, and the fool ignores it and suffers for it. I hope you're taking these things seriously, folks. Because with the moral collapse of our country, can you imagine the violence if our country has a war and it's fought on our soil? World War III. That's what Gordon Chang's predicting and has for some time. Can you imagine what that would be like? That's why I close every night with this. May God save America. Take care.